"You're not walking me down the aisle, Dad. You'll ruin my wedding." That's how my only daughter, Emily, cut me out of the most important day of her life. My little girl, the same one I carried on my shoulders at the county fair, the same one I stayed up late helping with science projects, the same one I worked 2 jobs to put through college, looked me in the eye and told me I wasn't good enough. I'll never forget the sting in my chest when she said it. It was like someone reached into my rib cage and crushed my heart with their bare hands. Now, before I continue. If you're new here, please like, comment, and subscribe. And tell us where you're watching from. My name's Tom Miller. I'm 58 years old, born and raised in a small town outside of Dayton, Ohio. Folks around here know me as a steady man, an electrician who's been crawling through attics and basements for over 30 years. I built my reputation one breaker box at a time, never cheated a soul, never missed a bill. I married young, my high school sweetheart, Carol. Together, we had Emily. For years, my whole life revolved around making sure she had more than I ever did. I gave up nights out with the guys, vacations, hobbies. Everything went into savings for her future. When Emily got accepted to Ohio State, I remember crying in my truck after dropping her off. Not because I was sad, though I was, but because I was so damn proud. Every blister, every late-night job, every time I said no to myself so I could say yes to her. It was all worth it in that moment. But I didn't know that somewhere along the line, she started to feel embarrassed by me. My work, boots, my calloused hands, the way I talk about life in plain words instead of polished speeches. Maybe I didn't fit into the world she built for herself, the world her mother encouraged her to chase. Carol always wanted Emily to marry up, to escape small-town Ohio and live the kind of life we only saw on TV. I should have seen the signs earlier. The way Emily hesitated when her college friends visited home and I tried to chat with them. The way she sometimes corrected my grammar or asked me to dress a little nicer for her school events. I brushed it off. I thought it was just a kid being a kid. Then came the engagement. Her fiancé, Ryan, came from money. His folks owned a string of car dealerships across the state. Clean-cut, smooth-talking, the kind of young man who, probably, never got dirt under his fingernails. I shook his hand at their engagement dinner and felt like he was already measuring me, already deciding where I fit in his world. Still, I smiled. Still, I opened my wallet. I paid for half that wedding. The dress, the flowers, the venue deposit. I wrote checks without hesitation. I wanted her to have the fairy tale she dreamed of, even if I had to drain the savings account I'd been keeping for my own retirement. But then, 3 weeks before the ceremony, she sat me down in her mother's kitchen. Carol was there too, sipping coffee like it was just another Tuesday. Emily looked me square in the eye and said, "Dad, I think it would be better if Uncle Jim walked me down the aisle. You're just too rough around the edges. Ryan's family, they might not understand. My own brother, my younger brother, Jim, who never lifted a finger for her growing up. The guy who skipped child support for his own kids and still owes me money from when I bailed him out 10 years ago. That's who she wanted instead of me." I felt the air leave my lungs. My throat went dry. Carol wouldn't even look at me. "Too rough around the edges," I repeated, just to make sure I heard it right. Emily nodded, almost apologetic, but not enough to take the words back. Something shifted inside me then. I sat there, silent, letting the shame settle in. My own daughter was embarrassed of me. Embarrassed of the man who kept the lights on, who fixed her first car, who cheered her on at every softball game. And in that silence, another thought crept in, quiet, but sharp as a blade. She thinks she can erase me from her story. But she forgot who's been holding the pen. Because there was something Emily, and even Carol, didn't realize. Something I'd kept tucked away in a fireproof box in my closet. Alongside the mortgage papers and old tax returns. It wasn't just checks I'd written for that wedding. No. I had the deed. The deed that tied the whole celebration. The very ground it stood on. Back to me. And if they wanted to cut me out, well, they were about to learn just how much power a man with calloused hands could hold. Emily's words rattled around in my skull for days after that kitchen ambush. Too rough around the edges. I replayed it at work, crawling under a stranger's porch to fix a short circuit. I replayed it at night, lying alone in my bed after a 12-hour shift, staring at the ceiling fan. Every time, it cut deeper. I tried to convince myself I misheard her. Maybe she was nervous. Maybe Carol put the words in her mouth. But no. Emily was steady, calm, rehearsed. That came from her. My daughter had made up her mind. The Friday after, I stopped at Miller's Diner. Same spot I'd been grabbing meatloaf and black coffee for 20 years. The waitress, Janine, topped off my cup and asked, "You ready for the big wedding, Tom?" "Bet you're proud." Proud. I just smiled and nodded, too ashamed to spill the truth. What was I supposed to say? That I was paying for a party I wasn't even welcome in? That my daughter thought I was a liability? The whole town knew about that wedding. Emily was moving up. I was the father of the bride who'd worked his whole life so she could have something better. And yet, I was supposed to watch her walk down the aisle on Uncle Jim's arm, while I sat in the crowd like some distant relative. One night, I couldn't sleep. I poured myself a glass of bourbon and dug out the fireproof box from my closet. The metal lid squeaked as I lifted it, and inside, there it was. The deed to the old Granger property. C. When Emily and Ryan started planning their wedding, they wanted something rustic but elegant. Some Pinterest dream with twinkle lights and weathered barns. Problem was, all the venues in Dayton were either too fancy or too pricey. That's when I made my move. I'd been holding on to the Granger property for years. Bought it cheap when Old Man Granger passed, thinking maybe one day I'd fix it up, maybe retire there. The barn was solid, the land stretched wide, and with a little cleaning, it made the perfect backdrop for a wedding. I offered it to them, free of charge. I said, "Use it. Make it your dream day." They were thrilled. Carol bragged to her friends about how generous I was. Emily said, "Thanks, Dad," like I'd just handed her a glass of water, not the foundation of her wedding day. But they never asked whose name was on the paperwork. That was the card in my back pocket. And the more I thought about it, the angrier I got. The next Sunday, I drove over to Carol's house. Well, technically, our old house, the one I signed over in the divorce. Emily was there, sitting at the kitchen island, flipping through a glossy bridal magazine. Carol gave me that polite, distant smile she always saved for me now. I cleared my throat. "Emily, you sure about Jim walking you down?" She sighed, like I was dragging her into something petty. "Dad, please don't make this harder than it needs to be." "I'm your father," I said, my voice low. "Not Jim. Not anyone else." "Me." Ryan stepped in from the living room then, wearing one of those tailored shirts that probably cost more than my monthly grocery bill. He put his hand on Emily's shoulder. "Tom, we just want the day to go smoothly. You'll have your place." "My place?" I asked. "And what place is that, Ryan?" He hesitated, then said, "As a guest. An honored guest." Carol nodded like that settled it. I stood there, staring at the three of them. My own blood, my ex-wife, and this boy who thought he was doing me a favor. I clenched my fists, but I kept my voice calm. "All right," I said, "if that's what you want." Emily looked relieved, like she'd dodged a fight. Ryan gave me a stiff smile. Carol turned back to her coffee. But inside, I'd already made up my mind. They thought I was just a guest. They thought they could erase me from the picture. Well, they were about to find out just how big a mistake that was. Because I wasn't just the father of the bride, I was the man who owned the land. Their wedding was standing on. And I was done. Being embarrassed, the wedding countdown was plastered all over social media. Emily posting photos of her dress fittings, Ryan showing off the catering menu, Carol boasting about flower arrangements. Every picture, every caption. It was like watching a show I'd been written out of. But what struck me most was the picture of Uncle Jim standing beside Emily at a rehearsal dinner, his arm around her shoulders, his toothy grin wide as ever. The caption read, "So thankful for the man who will walk me down the aisle." I stared at that screen until my vision blurred. Jim, the same brother who borrowed money from me in 2009 and never paid me back, the same guy who dodged his responsibilities as a father, was now being painted as the father figure. Something inside me snapped into focus. I pulled out the deed again that night, ran my fingers over my own name, bold and clear. Thomas Miller, not Carol, not Emily, not Ryan, not Jim. Me. That barn, that field, those acres. It all belonged to me. Without me, their fairy tale wedding was nothing more than a pile of decorations and folding chairs sitting on trespassed land. So I made a call. "Al," I said, when my old buddy picked up. "You still practicing law over in Montgomery County?" "Sure am, Tom," he said. "What's going on?" I told him everything. The wedding, the way they cut me out, the fact they were holding the whole thing on my property. Al whistled low. "You've got leverage, Tom, big leverage. Question is, what do you want to do with it?" That night, I lay awake thinking. Revenge was tempting, but it had to be surgical. This wasn't about shouting or throwing fists. No, this had to sting. In the place they cared about most, appearances. The Millers weren't about money or luxury. We were about pride, respect. But Ryan's family? Carol? Even Emily now? They were about status, image, how things looked to the outside world. So that's where I'd hit them. The Monday before the wedding, I drove out to the Granger property. Workers were stringing up lights across the barn beams, hauling in rented tables, setting up a dance floor. The place looked beautiful. I'll give them that. One of the planners waved at me, clipboard in hand. "You must be the father of the bride. Great space you've got here. You'll be so proud Saturday." I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. "Oh, I'll be there," I said. "Front row." That night, I sat at my kitchen table and drafted a letter with Al's help. A legal notice, clear, binding, and impossible to ignore. On Thursday, just 2 days before the ceremony, I delivered it myself. Slipped it into an envelope, sealed it, and drove over to Carol's house. Emily answered the door. She was in sweats, hair up in a bun, no makeup. The first time she looked like my little girl in weeks. "Dad?" she asked, confused. Got something for you, I said, handing her the envelope. She tore it open right there in the doorway. Her eyes scanned the page, and I saw her face pale. What is this? She whispered. It's a reminder, I said calmly. That barn, that land, it's mine. Always has been. And unless I say otherwise, there won't be a wedding there come Saturday. She blinked at me, stunned. You wouldn't? Wouldn't I? I asked. You cut me out, Emily. You said I was too embarrassing to walk you down the aisle. You told me I was just a guest. Well, guests don't own the venue. Her lip trembled. Behind her, I heard Ryan's voice. What's going on? He came up, saw the letter, and his jaw tightened. Tom, this is ridiculous, he said, trying to puff himself up. We've already put down money. We've already planned everything. On my land, I cut in. Without my blessing. Emily looked between us. Tears forming. Dad, please don't ruin this for me. But I shook my head slowly. I'm not ruining anything. I'm just making sure the man who raised you isn't erased from his own daughter's story. For the first time, they realized this wasn't a bluff. Ryan tried to argue. Carol came to the door, her arms crossed, glaring at me like I was trash on her porch. But I didn't raise my voice. I didn't beg. I just turned and walked back, too. My truck, leaving them with the paper in Emily's trembling hands. As I drove off, I caught one last glimpse in the rearview mirror. My daughter standing frozen in the doorway, clutching that deed like it was a grenade about to go off. And I thought to myself, let's see how much they think of Uncle Jim now. Friday morning, the day before the wedding, I was sipping my coffee at Miller's Diner when my phone started buzzing nonstop. Emily, Carol, even Ryan. I let it ring, let it buzz on the table until Janine gave me a curious look. Popular man. Today, she said, smirking as she topped off my mug. Not the kind of popular I ever asked for, I muttered. By noon, my voicemail was full. Emily crying, begging me not to ruin her big day. Ryan demanding I be reasonable. Carol snapping that I was acting like a child. Not once did anyone say they were sorry. Not once did Emily say, "You're my father, and I was wrong to push you aside." No. They just wanted me to step back in line. That afternoon, Ryan finally showed up at my place, pulled into my driveway in his shiny black Lexus, suit jacket slung over his shoulder like he owned the world. I was fixing a loose board on my porch when he walked up. Tom, he started, all fake polished charm. We need to talk, man to man. I set down my hammer. Go ahead. He cleared his throat. Look, we can't change the plan this late in the game. Emily's dreamed of this her whole life. If you pull the land from under us, you're not just hurting her. You're humiliating her in front of everyone. Do you want that? I narrowed my eyes. Funny. Humiliation is exactly what I felt when my daughter told me I wasn't fit to walk her down the aisle. Ryan shifted uncomfortably, but he tried to keep that salesman's smile plastered on. We'll make it up to you. We'll put your name in the program. We'll, I don't know, give you a toast. I almost laughed in his face. A toast. You're offering me crumbs at a feast I paid for. For the first time, I saw the mask slip. His jaw tightened. Fine. What do you want, Tom? Money? Recognition? You name it. That's when I leaned in, voice low and steady. I don't want money. I don't want a line in a program. I want respect. And tomorrow, when those doors open, it'll be me walking Emily down the aisle. Not Jim, not anybody else. Me. Or there won't be a wedding. Ryan stared at me like I'd just laid a bomb on the table. Because I had He didn't answer right. Away. Just spun on his heel, stormed back to his Lexus, and peeled out of my driveway. The next day, Saturday. I dressed in my one good suit, the same one I wore at my father's funeral, the same one I'd worn at Emily's college graduation. I drove to the Granger property, heart pounding like a drum in my chest. The place was packed. Cars lined the gravel road, music floated from the barn, laughter and chatter filled the air. Guests in suits and dresses mingled, snapping photos under the string lights I'd once imagined hanging for my daughter's happiness. I walked through the crowd, heads turning, whispers following. Some nodded politely. Others looked away, already knowing the story. Small towns have a way of spreading news faster than wildfire. When I reached the barn doors, there she was, Emily. She was stunning in her dress, veil tucked neatly into her hair, but her face was pale, her eyes red from crying. Uncle Jim stood beside her, looking smug in his rented tux. Then she saw me, and for a moment, she looked like that little girl again, the one who used to run into my arms after softball. Practice! Dad, she whispered. Jim puffed out his chest. You're not supposed to be here, Tom. I reached into my jacket pocket, pulled out the folded deed, and held it up. This says otherwise. The music started to swell inside. Guests turned their heads, waiting for the doors to open. But no one moved. Emily's lip trembled. Dad, please. Emily, I said softly, so only she could hear. I gave everything for you, and I'll give you this day too. But I won't be erased. It's me, or it's no one. She looked at Jim, at Ryan, at her mother hovering nearby with that icy glare. Then she turned back to me, tears spilling down her cheeks. And slowly, hesitantly, she nodded. Uncle Jim's face twisted, ready to argue, but Emily put her hand on my arm instead. It's you, Dad. It has to be you. For the first time in weeks, I felt air fill my lungs. I offered her my arm, steady and strong, and she took it. Together, we pushed open those barn doors. The crowd rose to their feet, gasps echoing as they saw me walking Emily down the aisle. Not disgraced, not erased, but right where I belonged. But as we walked, I caught Carol's expression. She wasn't defeated. No, she was furious. And in her fury, I knew this wasn't over. The ceremony went on like nothing had happened, at least to the guests. Emily walked down the aisle on my arm, Ryan waiting at the altar with a smile stretched so tight it looked painful. The preacher spoke. Vows were exchanged. Rings slipped onto trembling fingers. To everyone else, it was a fairy tale wedding. But I could feel the tension thick in the air, like humidity before a storm. Carol's glare followed me from the pew, her jaw clenched so hard I thought her teeth might crack. Jim sulked in the corner, arms folded, stripped of his moment in the spotlight. And Ryan? He looked like a man who'd just realized the ground beneath his feet wasn't nearly as solid as he thought. When the ceremony ended and applause filled the barn, I stepped aside, letting the newlyweds take their photos, their cheers, their spotlight. I didn't need the stage. I'd already made my point. But Carol wasn't about to let it go. She cornered me outside near the catering tent, while guests were distracted with champagne flutes and hors d'oeuvres. You humiliated us, she hissed, her voice low and sharp. I met her eyes calmly. No, you tried to humiliate me. I just reminded everyone who I am. You blackmailed your own daughter, she snapped. I shook my head. I stood up for myself, Big difference. She opened her mouth to fire back, but just then a voice behind us interrupted. "Excuse me, are you Thomas Miller?" We both turned. A man in a sharp suit, holding a business card. He introduced himself as a reporter from the Dayton Herald. Apparently, word of the family drama had leaked. Someone on the planning staff had whispered about the deed, the standoff. In a small town, it doesn't take long for gossip to snowball into news. Carol's face went white. Status was her religion, reputation her altar. The idea that the whole town would read about her ex-husband forcing his way back into the wedding through a property deed? That was her nightmare. I could have said no. I could have turned the man away, but I didn't. Instead, I gave him a statement, calm, measured, about how fathers matter, about how no one should be erased from their own child's story, about how respect can't be bought or polished away. By Monday morning, the article was front-page news. Father of the bride holds deed, reclaims his place. Folks in town read it over their morning coffee, shaking their heads, some chuckling, some nodding with quiet respect. And suddenly, it wasn't me who looked embarrassing. It was them. Carol, for scheming. Jim, for trying to steal my role. Ryan, for treating me like a nuisance instead of family. Even Emily, though folks pitied her, was whispered about for choosing status over her own father. Within weeks, the shine wore off their fairy tale marriage. Ryan's dealership family didn't like the scandal. They didn't like their name in the paper tied to drama. Rumors spread that Ryan was already looking for ways to distance himself. Carol's social circle shrank. Ladies at her church stopped inviting her to luncheons, whispering behind her back instead. And Uncle Jim? He became the town joke. The guy who thought he could play father of the bride but got cut down in front of everyone. Me? I went back to work. Fixed outlets, replaced wiring, ate meatloaf at the diner. But everywhere I went, folks clapped me on the back. "Good for you, Tom," they said. "About time someone stood up for themselves." And Emily? She called me. One evening, her voice quiet. "Dad, I'm sorry. It wasn't much. Maybe it wasn't enough. But it was a start. I told her I loved her, because I do. Always will. But I also told her this. Respect, Emily. It's a two-way street. You don't get to choose when your father matters. Either I matter always, or I don't matter at all." Silence hung on the line, then a sniffle, then a whispered, "I understand. I don't know what her marriage will become. I don't know if Ryan will last, or if Carol will ever forgive me, or if Jim will ever stop sulking. But I do know this. They tried to erase me. They tried to write me out of family history like I was a footnote. But I held the deed in my hand. And in the end, it wasn't me who lost dignity. It was them. Tell us your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories.